Welcome to Harbor Point TV. This is a brand new version of our online service specifically designed with you in mind, with our weekend message and then space to respond in thought, reflection, and prayer in worship. Whether you're watching at home with family or amongst friends, listening to the podcast on your commute or even a run, our hope is that you might find and take your next step towards Jesus, whatever that might be. And in this new portable format, we invite you to share it with others. So to get more information, get connected, or to make a contribution, visit our website at harborpoint.church. This is Harbor Point TV.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeff McGuire. This is HPTV from Harbor Point Church in San Juan Capistrano, California. Before we get started, quick shout out. The guy reached out to us on Instagram. His Instagram handle is @NappyJack. So a friend of his recommended HPTV, and he's a lot like a lot of people. He's finding his way back to church, back to Jesus. And so he started tuning in. And to show his appreciation, he sent me 2 fully limited edition Harbor Point face masks. You can't buy these in stores, not available on Amazon. I own the only 2 in the world. Actually, my kids have decided that they own the only 2 in the world. But I guess, he printed them himself, sent them to me. Now, so yes, thanks to @NappyJack, I'm so glad that you're rediscovering the love and the life Jesus intended for you. My hope is the same for all of you as well who are watching, wherever you might be in your own journey. Now, let's get right to it. Many of you know, and I've expressed this to you in a number of ways throughout my life and ministry. I've expressed this a bunch. I have an ongoing insecurity about what to tell people my job is. Explaining it to people who, they don't know. It's such a weird job, and people don't know, what I do or how to react when I tell them what I do. I think even most church people don't know either. Now, and I may have mentioned this to some of you before, but years ago at a class reunion, a high school buddy of mine knew I worked at a church, and this is a very smart guy. He's a Harvard grad. He was like, "So you're in charge of a church?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And he's like, "Well, when do you, where do you," and he can't find the word for what I'm doing. He's like, "When do you conduct?" And I was like, "Conduct?" And all I could think of was this. It was like, all I could think of was what I know of orchestra conductors. The white tie, tuxedo, baton waving, high society types with the wild hair and bizarre, almost like pained facial expressions. I mean, generally, would you not agree? It looks like these are people that appear to be publicly being electrocuted. I mean, they lead a band of people who play the kind of music that smart people like, and you've seen these people. Check this guy. This guy's my favorite. I don't have a lot of favorites. This is my favorite picture. This is Gustavo Dudamel. He's the music director for the LA Philharmonic. Look at this hair. He has the best hair. He has incredible moves. Look at his facial expressions. I mean, if you judged a conductor based on his ability to look like he had a pained face, he definitely looks like he's being stabbed. I mean, this guy's awesome. Now, check this out. And I know this isn't really helpful if you're only listening to this, but I just couldn't resist. So check out this video later, on the Harbor Point website. Just make sure you check it out. But here's what I did. I took some video of Dudamel. He's actually playing a Dvorak symphony. Yes, the very same symphony that will eventually inspire the song Baby Shark. Only I overlaid it with what is perhaps one of the greatest b-boy breakdance anthems of all time, Herbie Hancock's Rocket. Now, he's not being edited or sped up at all. There's a minimum of editing. I just put the 2 things together. Check this out. This is insane. By the way, you notice the Pope is clearly enjoying it. Okay, here we go. Check this out. Look at those moves. His face is like he's being stabbed. It's incredible. This guy's on fire. Everything's moving. The hair's incredible. Now, that's what's in my head when my buddy asks me, "So when do you conduct?" Not necessarily the Herbie Hancock version, but just the conductor guy. First of all, I should say this. I wish I had moves like Gustavo Dudamel. I don't know what he's doing or how that helps the orchestra to play Baby Shark, but I can tell you this. The term conductor isn't all that helpful of a picture of what I actually do. There's another picture, another image that's a whole lot more helpful than conductor. And somewhere in there, in that other image, is what I want to talk about today, because that image, that picture, is as important for you as it is for me, especially in the time like we're in right now. Now, a few weeks ago, we started our current series by asking this question. What is the Bible, according to the Bible, trying to accomplish? What's the Bible, according to the Bible, trying to do? In other words, if you were trying to figure out what the Bible intended for its readers, what might you discover? And what might surprise you is this. The Bible isn't primarily interested in making you more knowledgeable. It's not trying to impart some secret kind of insight or knowledge. It's not even trying to give you a kind of enhanced personal spirituality. The Bible, according to the Bible, is attempting to do something else entirely. And here's what it says. We've been using this scripture throughout the whole series. 2 Timothy 3:16 says this: all scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching and rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. Continues, so that. All of this scripture is for a purpose, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. What the Bible, according to its own language, is attempting to do in its readers is to thoroughly equip them to respond with every good work. We started this series, sort of the genesis of the idea of the series was inspired by people who, because of their special training or because of their preparation, and perhaps because they have an unusual amount of courage or dedication, because these people know how to respond first. They can assess a situation and they know what to do. These people are called first responders. We've all heard of them. Now, in that sense, what we've been looking at throughout the Bible is to see how is it, or might there be some kind of a directive on how we might not merely get through the world, but also how we might learn to respond from it as, to say it this way, versed responders. Now, this may be a time for a lot of us, myself included, to recover kind of a lost art of memorizing or committing to memory a few verses that have been helpful or maybe been particularly helpful in responding to our world. So, where do we go with that today? Now, across time and distance, across nearly every culture and in most religious systems in the world, people have had some version of a person within their culture who is tasked with one thing: to help the people make some kind of a connection between themselves and the divine, themselves and God, or the unseen. There's a person, then to say it this way, there's a person that spans the gap separating the relationship of human interaction between human beings and God, whatever, or the divine, or whatever you might call it. And it's the work of this person to be, among other things, a bridge between human beings and God. And the Bible uses a familiar term to describe that person. You would probably recognize this term. Of course, here's what it is. The term is priest. Priest. Now, depending on your own faith tradition, you have a lot of different impressions of what that might mean, what that might look like. I went to a Catholic high school, and I remember Father Mike and Father Martin and Father Gabriel. Many of you might be from a Catholic tradition. And these people carried out special services. They wore special clothes, and they lived a life of tremendous sacrifice. Now, regardless of your own impression or understandings or upbringings or even issues, or the overarching purpose of a priest is to build, or perhaps more fittingly, to be a bridge. Now, a bridge is a far more helpful word picture than conductor. And that's, I suppose, one way to say it is that's my goal, to in one way or another, to function as a kind of bridge. Truly, I don't know how to tell people or explain that one either. If they ask me what I do, I don't feel like it's completely honest if I just told someone who asked me, what do you do? I build bridges, or even funkier, I am a bridge. They either sound like an arrogant kind of structural engineer, or I sound like a spiritual weirdo. But the word picture, at least in its purest sense, is a bit clearer than conductor. And though I might not love the way it sounds when I try to explain it to other people, a bridge is actually a fairly apt description. But there's another layer to this thing. There's a whole other part to this. Now, some of you will be blown away by it. Some of you will be freaked out. Some of you will want to minimize it. Some of you will want to run from it. And some of you may actually love it. You might actually get inspired. In fact, that's my hope for most of you. Now, check this out. It's only 2 verses. They have the ability to be total game changers for how we respond to the world if we take them seriously. Total game changers if we take them seriously. Now, Peter, one of the original early followers of Jesus. By the way, if you look at the account of Jesus with Peter throughout his own life, he's notoriously a screw up among the apostles. Jesus is always correcting him and kind of redirecting him, but Peter ultimately takes on a huge role in the foundation of the church. And there's a couple of letters that he wrote to help the early church understand how to live as the church. 2 of those letters, after they started getting widely circulated, are actually in the Bible today. They became part of the Bible. And they're cleverly titled 1st and 2nd Peter, as in the first letter of Peter and the second letter of Peter. Stunning titles, amazing. Bible's notoriously wonderful for that kind of stuff. Now anyway, Peter is writing to a group of people who are scattered throughout the territory of what is now kind of roughly Turkey. And at the time of the writing, in around 62 to 64 AD, the early church is facing tremendous persecution. In fact, if you're with us last time, you heard Jeff Priest mention something about the reign of Emperor Nero, who, quote, loved to light his garden by the light of the Christians. Not the Christians were holding, candles and singing songs, the wonderful light of the Christians. No. What he meant was the burning of Christians, lighting them on fire, was something he cherished seeing. Now the point is this: the church, to whom Peter is writing, is under duress. The people are afraid, and evidently the emperor hates them so much that he delights in their suffering. So, here's what Peter writes to this group of people. 1 Peter 2:9, but you are a chosen people. Notice what he says next to this group of people: a royal priesthood. Now don't miss this. The you right here is a plural you. It's a you all kind of thing. If you're from the South, it's not just y'all, it's all y'all. And he's addressing more than just a few people who lead these assemblies of church people. Apparently he's talking to a whole group of people, not just one person who's the special leader guy kind of in charge of these communities. All y'all, you all of you guys, you're part of a priesthood. And what might that mean? You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Keep reading. He says, that you may declare the praises of him, meaning Jesus, who has called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once, verse 10, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Now, to a large extent, a lot of the people that made up these church communities in Asia Minor came from all different backgrounds and people groups. And the only commonality among them was this: Jesus. And Peter says, in effect, up until Jesus and this new community, you were wanderers. You were sojourners. You were spiritual orphans, and you were in need of a family. You were not a people, and you were not a tribe. You guys all came from a different bunch of tribes, different backgrounds and people, but now you're a people, a specially regarded group. And Peter's very clearly pointing to something here with the specificity of his language. The story of these Jesus people is reminiscent of another group of wandering people who were without a home, who felt the pain of persecution. In fact, he's directly making the connection to that group by his choice of words. Now let's back up about 1,500 years. Take a look. This is Exodus 19. Check this out. On the first day of the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. Now the people being talked about here, these are the former slaves of Egypt, the Israelite people who have been liberated by God and led by Moses into their first taste of freedom. They've left their slave masters in Egypt, headed into the desert, and after 3 months have come to this place called Mount Sinai, which is where Moses will receive the 10 Commandments in the following chapter. Okay, verse 2. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Now, a couple things to keep in mind here. At this time, there's very little formal organization in terms of what we now know of or think of as the faith of the Israelites. That hasn't happened yet. In fact, the first ever Jewish tradition of Passover happened 3 months before this moment right here in the Bible. Most of what we might imagine as religious responsibilities today fell to the most senior male member of any household. And for several generations, remember this is like 400 plus years worth of generations, the people who belong to Israel's God, the Israelite people, they've only known their life as slaves. No one, nor anyone else living in their family has even a memory of what it's like to live as a free person. Verse 3. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, this is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob and what you are to tell the people of Israel. Verse 4, you yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, God says, tell the people, remind them that I rescued them. They don't have to speculate about whether or not their God is a good God. Remind them that I rescued them. You saw it. You have seen. There's this imagery, beautiful imagery, of being carried on eagle's wings. Such a picture of divine rescue and favor. God continues. Remember, tell these people this thing. Verse 5. I'm sorry. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations, you will be my treasured possession. The words treasured possession in Hebrew actually describe the kind of thing that uniquely belongs to the king for his own purposes and enjoyment. It's not like the other stuff the king has in his kingdom where the public overlaps with it, like, land or structures or whatever. You can think of it like this. Well, last week, our friends let us borrow a cabin that they have access to. It's awesome. So I took our family up there. And when we get there, of course, we do like what any normal person would do when we get to some stranger's house where we're staying there for a little bit. We went through every single possible door and cabinet and closet and searched for all the dead bodies and stuff that they might have there, because that's just, that's what a human being does. Now, invariably, we came across a locked closet. And in that closet, is the stuff that isn't for public access. It's the stuff that's in the private collection for the owner only. Are you with me what that means? There's this locked closet, stuff in it, right? Now, this term special possession describes what's in the quote unquote owner's closet, that locked closet. People can stay in the house, they can swim in the pool, they can have access to everything else, but only I can have access to the stuff behind this locked door. That's my special or treasured possession. And God is saying that the special possession, this treasured possession, is the whole Israelite people. Then, now notice the language here. Verse 5. Again, although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That's almost word for word what Peter writes to his letter to the early church. Peter, in his letter to the early church, he clearly wants to make this direct connection. So roughly 1,500 years before Jesus, long before the church ever existed, God says to a group of wandering, disempowered former slaves without wealth, resources, without land, or any army to speak of, he says, although the whole earth is mine, although I have the pick of the mightiest civilizations with the most power and influence and the most wealth, I choose you guys. You're my special possession, and you are an entire kingdom of priests. Not a kingdom of kings, not a kingdom of business owners and power brokers, and not a kingdom of nice people. No. Your sacred role, your vocation in the world is to be priests, to be the bridge for the world so that the world might encounter God. The newly freed slaves, these desert wanderers who barely believe in the leadership of Moses to get them where they're supposed to go, who frequently beg and even attack, they even start little micro revolutions to take them back to Egypt, and the slavery that accompanied it, often because they don't like the food in the desert. You can read about it. It's true. They get so tired of the food, they're like, let's go back to slavery. To the entire nation of these people, God says, you are a kingdom of priests. That's their vocation. Now, there are a lot of ways to characterize a vocation. On the one hand, a vocation is just, a job. But that may not fully capture the greater sense of what it's all about. In a lot of ways, it's more helpful to think about a vocation as a far bigger thing than just merely a job. Consider this for a second. Consider a superhero as having a vocation, or perhaps a calling that might be more helpful. And when you think of it like that, you come across a couple of things. And I came across an article, a couple of psychology professors wrote about this very idea, and here's what they had to say about the superhero and the superhero's vocation. They said it like this. We define calling as having three dimensions. A transcendent summons. This is a great phrase, by the way. I love this phrase. That there's something in this idea, like there's an invitation to something way beyond what the invitee could have ever imagined. Someone or something beyond them, beyond their usual realm of experience, invites them into something. A transcendent summons to approach the work, whatever they're being invited into, to approach the work in a way that connects to a broader sense of life and purpose and meaning, with others-centered, others-oriented values and goals as a key source of motivation. So briefly consider any of the recent spate of superhero movies, right? Just think about it for a second. A mysterious representative comes to a person who has some unique ability and offers them a chance to make their specialness matter. We'll call that a transcendent summons. Then the would-be hero is told, along with the movie's obvious subtext, that by utilizing their powers, particularly in this way, they'll have a greater sense of their identity and their purpose. But all of that is only true if they use their powers for the good of other people. Transcendent summons, a broader sense of purpose, and others-oriented. Now, to put this back in the context of the Bible, God instructs Moses to tell his people, here's everyone's calling, their vocation. Tell them. A summons, by the way, can't get more transcendent than God's voice. And here's what we discover. God's rescue for these people isn't just for his people. God's rescue is not just for his people. It's through his people for the world. God's rescue is not just for his people, it's through his people for the world. N.T. Wright, a highly regarded Bible scholar, says it this way. God has not brought the children of Israel out of Egypt for their own sake alone. Though freeing slaves is indeed one of God's special delights, he has set them free in order that they may be the people through whom he will set the world free. Free to worship God, free to be fully and gloriously human. In other words, freedom was never intended to be freedom for freedom's sake. It was freedom for the sake of the world. Now that's a broader, others-oriented kind of purpose. Are you with me in seeing where this is going? To boil it down to the simplest possible form, to take what God says to his people in the desert about how they're supposed to respond to their world, and to take what Peter repeats to this new group of people who gather in Jesus' name about how they're supposed to respond to their world. It's just this. You guys, you all, be a bridge. Be a bridge. For everyone, not just a few people, but for everyone, be a bridge. So to this non-Jewish audience of people who have no connection to Israel's story, Peter says, you get to take that on as a vocation, the one intended for Israel, the one to set the world free, and it's all rooted in identity and belonging. Look again at 1 Peter 2:9. Starting with this identity statement, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. In other words, and this is really critical, God's people are not chosen for their vocation because they've already proven themselves worthy of it. They're declared a kingdom of priests by virtue of their belonging as special possession to God. Let me say that again. God's people are not chosen for this particular vocation because they've already proven themselves worthy of it with a long track record of being super amazing. No. They're declared a kingdom of priests and a special possession by virtue of their belonging to God. And it's so important to catch this point, because so much of our impression, for a lot of us, of the Bible is that we're on a worthiness kind of journey, tipping the scales in our favor as best as we can, so that we might be declared his special possession. But the Bible actually works pretty hard to undermine that idea. So much of it is written in a way that declares or bestows identity before any action is ever prescribed. Or said better, all action necessarily flows out of the identity that we're given. What we do is baked into who we are. Peter is saying this to a group of people who have put their lives, their faith in Jesus. And he says, you are a people, a special possession, and you belong to God, and you were intended to belong. And he says, look, receive this identity, this kind of belonging, then act. I think so many people get burnt out on God because their understanding about themselves is steeped in the notion that they're going to have to develop a spiritual resume that might entitle them to belong. Now, maybe that's you. Is there a part of you that's still asking the question, what do I have to do to get God to do whatever God's supposed to do in my life? Maybe, just to take this for example, maybe you're starting in the wrong place. Peter says, repeating God's own words to his own audience, you are a special possession, and maybe that's worth revisiting this week for you. Maybe there's a part of you that's lost that sense. Maybe you've never really thought about that before. I mean, if that's true, and if God's not lying, and if Peter is telling the truth, then everyone connected to Jesus, you all, plural, you are a priest. If you're sitting with someone, look over at them and say, congratulations on entering the priesthood. Hey, congratulations, you made it. In fact, that's really my job, to help people learn their identity, that they belong to God through Jesus as his adopted sons and daughters, and then to send them out to their world to be a bridge. That's it. I'm not a conductor. I don't merely conduct religious services, and our courageous and sacrificially amazing staff isn't here for that reason either. Being a priest is about making a way for people to encounter God. That's a priest. That's a bridge. Occasionally, the Bible will use the word mediator. Maybe you've heard that word before too. A go-between. It's kind of the same idea between parties. That God through you to the world to be a mediator, and to be that, to be a mediator, to function as a proper bridge between two parties. Now listen, to do that, both parties on both ends have to believe that the thing connecting them can be trusted. To be a mediator or to function as a proper bridge, both parties on both ends have to believe that the thing connecting them can be trusted. And what's absolutely astounding here is this, that God has already declared his people to be worthy of being priests. That's their vocation. That's what he's designed them to do. That's not to say they always do this well. The whole nation of priests and the actual officially appointed priests who lead them aren't always amazing at their jobs. I'm sure you can imagine this to be true if you've read the Bible at all. But that is what they were intended for. God chose them to do that, even when they don't do it well. God has already declared his people to be worthy of being his priests. So in that sense, the question is this: how does this kingdom of priests treat the world that they're supposed to help in finding God's kind of freedom? And that's where it gets interesting. For me, I'm more and more confronted with the idea of being mostly like a kind of like drawbridge, like what has the things that kind of go up, like, oh, here's the channel, the cars can't go until right. Because let's be clear, there's so many lame people I don't want to deal with. And honestly, what I believe about some people, how I treat more people than I'd like to admit, I'm actually more like those drawbridges in the vertical position. And I wish it wasn't true, it just is. The truth is, anytime I hold back on a relationship with the people in my life, what I'm really doing in essence is raising the drawbridge to God. Now, I do it with people I don't like. I do this with people that annoy me. I do this with people that I'm envious of, people I wish I was more like or that have what I want. I even do this through other people. I attempt in subtle and insidious little ways, sometimes even unconsciously, to encourage the people I do like and do love to treat the people I don't worse. So I talk a little bit about them. I might present an idea. Whenever I do that, which is far more often than I'd like to admit, I'm stepping out of my intended role. I'm just making it harder for them to encounter God. Because like it or not, I'm intended to be a bridge. That is my heroic calling, and it is your heroic calling too. Let me ask you, who in your life needs a bridge? Who in your life does not need a fight from you as you rightly defend a thing? Who in your life doesn't need another dose of well-deserved shame or doubled down version of morality? Who in your life isn't looking for another reminder of the broken rules that they've got going on in their life? Who in your life needs a bridge? Maybe you need a bridge. Maybe you've been lost or disconnected or lonely, and maybe now more than ever, you're feeling a longing and a searching for God that you just can't seem to find. And the Bible describes Jesus as the ultimate priest, the bridge, the mediator. He's the one who would in love offer himself as the ultimate sacrifice for the world, and he's more present than you might have imagined. So without any cleaning up, without any dusting off or whatever, maybe today's a day in which you decide to make your way to the Father who loves you as his special possession. So once again, who in your life needs a bridge? The world is dying for a bridge. And you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Consider this moment right now, wherever you are, however you're watching, however you're listening, consider this moment our collective, your transcendent summons, the special calling God has for his people to be a bridge, to be a priest. So, spend your week as a priest. See how it feels. And next week, we'll talk about what I didn't tell you about what it means to be a priest, because that's going to get even more interesting. But that's next time. In the meantime, God bless you as his special possession.
I've tried so hard to see it. It took me so long to believe it. That you choose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve, and you take the broken things and raise them to glory. You are my champion. Giants fall where you stand undefeated. Every battle you won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence, unseated with a heavenly place, undefeated with the one who has conquered it all. Now I can finally see it. You're teaching me how to receive it. So let all the striving cease. This is my victory. You are my champion. Giants fall where you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who the one who has conquered it all. When I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the authority Jesus has given me. When I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority Jesus has given me. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. You've crowned me with confidence. I am seated at the heavenly place, undefeated. By the power of your name, I am seated at the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. You've conquered it all. God, you've conquered it all. Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen. 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 The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen. 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 It is so. Amen. 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 Amen.
May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations on your family and your children and their children and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations. On your family and your children and their children and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations. On your family and your children and their children and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations. On your family and your children and their children and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you, within you. He is with you, he is with you in the morning, in the evening, and you're coming and you're going, and you're weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, 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 he is for you. Amen. Amen.
Thank you for joining us. If you would like to reach out to a pastor to talk about some possible next steps, get information about attending or viewing one of our live gatherings, or to make a contribution, be sure to visit our website at harborpoint.church. Also, don't forget to take a look at the discussion questions on our website to help you keep the conversation going.